G'day and welcome to another edition of the Aussie Ideas Man. This time I'm going to show my face, at least for the first edition. I don't know whether I'll even do part 2 or part 3 of the Cretin's interview with the snake oil CEOs at APTERA. This time I'm just going to weed out some small portions of his interview and concentrate on when the APTERA is going to be first sold to the public. I'm going to look at what sort of promises we get and compare with the promises of old. The cretin here is trying to hold them down to a date and does a very poor job of it. And I'm just going to make some comments along the way just to see what people can get out of this. And so here we go.
Hello everyone, this is Steve with APTERA Owners Club. Recently I had an opportunity to sit down with Chris and Steve, and I think it speaks to the level of open...
Just a minor detail, but the cretin isn't sitting down with Chris and Steve. He's on a video link, so he hasn't gone and sat down with them. It's just a matter of fact that all three of them happen to be sitting down, but he's not with them. I like to get picky right from the start.
Openness and respect they have for the community, that they are willing to take time out of their day to talk to a small YouTube channel and answer questions totally unedited and without any editorial control over what's put out. So I can tell I'm not a very good journalist because I get a little flustered when I'm asking what I perceive to be uncomfortable questions, and I try to ask them some uncomfortable questions in this interview. So I hope that you guys gain something out of this.
Hi.
Hey, there you go. I can hear you.
Perfect.
Perfect.
With the laptop microphone, Steve, is it too echoey?
It's not. It sounds fine on my end.
Oh, okay.
Perfect.
Does it sound good when we talk in just a normal voice? Should we speak up? Does that sound good?
That sounds fine. If you're speaking normally right there, that's good.
Perfect.
Okay,
We're without our microphone equipment today because Chris is in Paris.
Right, and he's using it, huh?
So we're making do with the laptop today.
Yeah, I got a bunch of pictures and video from...
Another thing to be picky about, just to begin with, is the fact that they're showing the setup for video and audio, which none of this is even necessary. Beats me why he's including it. Maybe he gets paid for the seconds he has on his videos and anything to fill those seconds. I don't know. The other thing is, the other minor issue is that this company that's going to make lots and lots of cars doesn't even have two microphones. The mind boggles. They're just going to use a laptop because Chris has taken the only microphone that they own overseas. Crazy. Let's keep going.
Some European friends that went to that convention.
Cool.
All right, that's nice.
Well, I'm downloading it right now. I think he's got it like on his own personal server, so it's like really slow. It's taking like 4 hours to download. But
Seen more than we have. I think we've just seen what they posted to the Twitters.
Okay. All right. Well, you guys will get to see it.
Nice. Looking forward.
Hey, so thanks a lot. And nice to finally talk to you, Steve. I've talked to Chris several times, but haven't had the pleasure of talking to you before.
No, it's good to finally do so. I know you've made your rounds around the APTERA team, and it's only a matter of time before we get to talk. So nice to meet you.
Great. All right. So I think we should just kind of get started. I think the question that everyone wants to know is, do we have a timeline? And do we have a timeline for when the production intent vehicles are going to be built? And is this timeline dependent on more funding, or do we have the funding for the production intent vehicles?
Be sure to look for an answer there, a timeline, and what does it depend on regarding finance. Let's see how close to answering that these two clowns get.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and we get that question all the time too. So, we do have a timeline to build these production intent builds. We do have the funds to build these production intent builds, but really we're trying to build everything we need to have in the company to build 20,000 vehicles a year. And that's tooling, that's equipment, that's, the people, that's the processes. It's all these things that we need to come together. And we don't want to just start, building station builds or serial builds, at a couple a week. We want to get this vehicle into production at high volume so we can deliver on the promise to over 47,000 people that are now waiting for the APTERA. So the first step is to get these production intent builds done. The second step is to inspire people to continue to invest in our mission. And we hope that some of those investments are bigger dollars. We can talk about that, I'm sure, with some other questions you have.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Then we can start launching and filling this plant full of people and equipment and building 20 vehicles a day to start, and then 40 vehicles a day, and then 80 vehicles a day. And then, we can really start making a dent in that first 47,000 number.
And I don't know if you have seen the pictures of the Bink in France.
Yeah, looks awesome.
Thank you. Those parts were made earlier this year, and we have enough for, I think, 16 more vehicles or so. So all of those parts are already made off of commission tools. They've all gone through the validation and inspection process. You've probably seen pictures of them shrink wrapped and waiting on a rack for us to start building them.
Yes.
There's still some small design changes in the front subframe, for example. You saw recently the crash simulation video.
Mm-hmm.
Had to make some modifications in the battery frame and subframe to achieve that. And then we're on the track the next few weeks in Italy with our team and Tennessee, sort of validating the production geometry of the suspension. Once those parts are locked out, then we can get the castings and the frame and begin building rolling vehicles.
Okay. So I know based on the February update, the high production line is going to take more funding to make that. And
Okay, I'll stop here because I could not see any timeline in what they said. They were all over the shop with lots of irrelevant points, but I just could not see a timeline. No week or month, not even a year, as to when we're going to get these production vehicles up for sale.
we need more funding for customer delivery vehicles. Is that correct?
That's right.
So, are you waiting for that to happen to build these PI vehicles? Because the PI vehicles need a lot of testing and validation to be done, like the crash testing and things like that, right? And so, you have the funds to build that. So are we going to wait on the funds to build out the assembly line to build the PI builds, or are those two kind of separate things that are independent of each other?
They're two separate things, and Chris and Tom and Blake and the finance team are working really hard to get the financing in place for the high production. But in the short term, we have a number of PI builds that we have scheduled. Now they all have purposes. Some are crash tests, some are braking systems, etc. Delay some or move some up and down the list depending upon how well the funding is going. But we are building the first ones right now.
Okay. We don't need to raise more funds to build those PI builds, but we are still raising funds to build out the first production lines, buy all the tooling and equipment necessary to build at high volume. Really cool thing is that we've already got all the high volume tooling for the body structure, but have all the high volume tooling for some of the injection molds for the interior.
I'll stop here too because I'll remind people that their original plan 4 years ago was to have alphas, betas, gamma, and then deltas. They've, for no real reason, changed delta to PI. But in either case, we get to the gamma, and that was supposed to be a hand-built representation of the finished machine. It wasn't a finished hand-built representation of a finished machine because it turned out to be under 70% done with so many things not even included. And I'd go as far as to say that it took them 7 months to put the cooling hoses on between the cooling system over the batteries and the motors. So if it took them 7 months after they'd launched the Gamma to do the cooling system, still no screen setup, still no air conditioning, still no torque vectoring or regen braking, so many things missing. Not even the body was right. The body was resin infused material that they were planning on doing and then changed before they even built the Gamma. They were changing to the carbon fibre SMC fiberglass combination with an aluminium frame and a roll bar. Completely different body on what was supposed to be Gamma, the representation of an item that the customer was going to buy. So it was, when I said 70%, when you consider that the body changed and they knew the body was changing before they built the Gamma, you can see that this thing was no representation of what people would buy at all, not the slightest. The next step after Delta was promised to be a production-made representation of what customers would buy. That is, that it would be completely built on the production line. Deltas were going to be completely built on the production line, and then all the validations and crash tests and all those would be done on those Deltas. The PIs, call them either one, doesn't matter. Deltas, PIs, either way, these are planned to be made completely on the production line that would produce cars for customers. I say cars, I'm so used to hearing many people call them cars that I just mistakenly do it all the time now. These EVs for customers are supposed to be in the PI or Delta, regardless of which way you say it, should be completely built and all done on a production line, the production line that's going to be used. Now these PIs are promised to be half built, that is, they still won't contain many of the things required that you would be buying, like air conditioning, maybe even regenerative braking. Many of these things are going to be missing off the PI builds, and the other thing is that nearly all of these PI builds are still going to be hand assembled. So they are completely breaking their promises, and they are way behind the eight ball. Anyway, let's get back to what sort of timeline they're going to reveal to us.
And the seats and, the castings for the frame. So those things are still yet to come. But we've had some amazing progress the last few months. It seems like since the beginning of the year, the markets have got a bit more life in them. And
the stock market's doing great.
Yeah, we've expanded the amount of deals we have that we're considering, and now we're zeroing in on what's best for us as we scale to production and beyond. So we're hoping to execute on something soon, and hopefully we'll be off to the races.
Okay. So what is the timeline? Like, when should we expect to see a PI build, like the first PI build? When should we expect that?
Yeah, we're working now with the Italians to complete some of the major part tooling. The problem is when you're building soft tooling, it can often take as long as it takes to build production tooling, just due with cheaper materials. So some of the plastics and some of the castings can take a couple months. And we haven't even started cutting tools for some of the parts that we have here. So we expect to have the full beaks in just a few weeks, but it will take a few more months to finish out some of the bigger parts, casting and such like that.
Yeah, there's some of the PI build schedule that are just basically binks and rollers. They're needed, for example, for the electrical team to route the wiring and do final placement and things like that. There's others that like Chris mentioned, parts for the interior. The tooling hasn't been made yet, so we're trying to get our heads around that whole PI build schedule in terms of timing based on what we know right now. The early ones, the ones that we can do, as I mentioned, the binks or the binks with rollers, we're starting right now. But we can only build one at a time with the production tools that we have.
Right.
We're not build any in parallel. It's really one at a time.
Right. So was it PI build 3 or something is going to be like kind of the press vehicle that like looks good and you can show it around? Like it sounds like that's like maybe even past the middle of the year, like in July, August. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, we hope not.
Okay.
Make that not the case, but that's going to be the one that's passable, at least at a distance for a production vehicle. But the main thing is that it's got the production tooling, production body, production structure, frame, all of those things that are kind of new leaps and thinking for the company. That's what you're going to
Yeah, the interesting thing, with the alpha builds and the gamma builds and beta, was that oftentimes we had the exterior of a part built, but we didn't have the interior, the B side of the part built. So like how it attaches. So, like with gamma, a lot of the parts, they were formed, they were laid up in carbon fiber, and then we had to like bond a stud on the back to actually attach it to the vehicle. With this latest production build schedule, nothing really exists like that.
Right.
Everything is a production part. So not only do you have the A side, you have the B side, how it attaches. So
Which is tool.
there's not a lot of wasted time with these PI builds like we wasted with Gamma and other builds, and just figuring out how to attach stuff and how it all goes together. I mean, all of these are production parts. They all have attachment strategies, attachment clips, attachment bolts, attachment whatever.
I mean, that's why we went with this technology in CPC, because when we were first building these composite bodies and trying to figure out how to scale, how do we do 100? How do we do 1,000 a year, 2,000 a year? With open mold technology, you only have one tooled side. You don't really have a tooled B side. And you do that, but you still have very low throughput and lots of hand labor. And these parts that we've designed now for the whole vehicle, the structure, the interior, everything, has a tooled A and B surface. And that means they nest right on each other, just like Lego blocks. So it's a radically simpler way of producing the vehicle than we have been with the betas or the alphas and the gammas, excuse me.
Yeah, I think everyone is like on board with the whole CPC thing, and I think all the community sees the advantages of that, and you guys have basically explained the advantages of that.
That's sticky.
Yeah, it looks great, and like the pictures I've seen for Paris look amazing.
Okay, so what they've done again is they've ranted and raved on about all sorts of irrelevant matters and still have not got around to a timeline. There is no timeline. They're now saying that they can do things faster with the CPC bodies than with their previous resin infused bodies. They can say that they can do things faster, but they're still talking as if they're going to hand assemble them. And this is wrong. This is not what they should be doing. And there's no timeline. They can hand assemble them faster, big deal. What we have to have is machinery. Those 12 stations have to exist. They have to have the machinery there, and they're not buying it. They're not procuring it from anybody. They've got nothing. Then they have to have all the other parts. Forget about just the body getting put together. Every other part before some customer can buy one. And before they can be crash tested or validation tested. And, those 16 so-called PIs have to have everything. And yet they've been making excuses that, oh no, there'll be something's missing for this and something's missing for that. They are breaking promises all the time, and they're not doing it right. And this is because they don't intend to follow through. They are just saying all this stuff to get more investors before they are, I guess, hard to even find on the face of the earth while they go pick up their brown paper bags. We'll keep going.
But I think that caused a little bit of a delay, but in the long run, that's going to make things faster. But everyone is really impatient to get these vehicles. We've been with you guys since 2020 when you guys relaunched, and we're closing in on 2024. And so I'm just trying to that's the question that everyone wants, is so we're just trying to see are things progressing as expected on you guys' end? And it sounds like the first couple of PI builds are going to be just kind of rollers and not have the interior and maybe not have the powertrain. They're just for testing specific things. And I think everyone wants to see here is the vehicle that's going to be made that people are going to take delivery of. When are we going to see that vehicle? Is it June, July, August, September?
Exact date, but we are working to make it before June, July.
Okay.
It's an exact date because I don't have all the information now. But
okay, so that's the kind of the goal is June, July to have that vehicle that has the actual battery pack from, I guess it's being built in Korea right now. CTNS is building the battery pack in Korea.
They're building the production. Go ahead. That's true.
Yeah, they're building the production lines in Korea. And they'll.
I really think Steve has put his foot in his mouth again, because he's committed to June, July, And this is because when the cretin makes a suggestion, he wants to appease the fanboys. He wants to go, all right, if you're suggesting that, I'll commit to it. Because what the heck, 4 or 5 broken dates in the past has not done too much harm to them. So what's one more? I'll make a prediction. This PI build that looks exactly like what customers will buy will not manifest itself in 2024 at all. Not a chance. And yet he's just committed himself to June, July because what the heck? We'll appease the fanboys.
Build the first production packs there, probably the first several hundred production packs.
Or modules rather, right? So the plan is they're building the assembly line and setting up there and break it down and bring it here to California.
Right.
Shipping us in the short term the PI builds of modules. And then we have our frame made from our vendor. We put the modules in the frame. We put the PDU in the frame. We make it a pack. Eventually CTNS will own all of that.
Okay.
That's going to take some time to ramp up. But
Right.
where the value they really bring to us right now is they can ramp up the module production like that. And that's a for us.
Yeah,
Right.
they've been, strategic partner and development partner. We finished the design here, but how do you actually get the module and pack through validation? And they've got amazing assets and tools over there that we just don't have here. So, we're expecting them to speed us along, but it's not the battery pack that's slowing us down. It's not the solar. It's not the body structure. It's these other, more expensive, heavy tool things, injection molds, the castings for the suspension and the chassis. Those are the things that, cost big bucks to tool, even in soft tools. And stuff that we kicked off at the beginning of the year, but it's kind of an iterative process with the manufacturer to beat it back and forth until they actually start to cut the tools. And some of the stuff hasn't had the tools started to get cut on the injection molds and the castings.
Okay. Are you able to tell us who's doing that? Like who's building the subframe and the suspension parts?
Yeah, we're working with partners in Italy and Europe for most of that stuff.
Okay.
Honestly, we're working on master supply agreements that extend well beyond the PI builds. And part of those agreements are how do they support us in the initial phases? And, they want to make these things known because they want the publicity too. So, we'll those master supply agreements as they come and as they're inked. But, the supply chain world has been a mess the last 2 years. COVID, really threw a wrench in it. Everything, which is still reverberating, but we've seen lots of prices come down the last 6 months. So it behooves us to kind of take our time and write the right supply agreements with some of these entities, and it only makes it better for us, for our customers, because we're able to offer product at a lower price. All these things are just now starting to gel, and some are economy and supply chain influenced, and some are just the timing of how you release some of these bigger and more impressive parts.
It's a well-known, highly esteemed Italian casting producer. So.
Okay.
Did you get who's building the frame out of all of that? Because the first thing Chris said was, yeah. And then he diverted as he usually does. He is a master snake oil salesman.
All right. Going back to that CTNS thing, there was this idea of having this joint venture between APTERA and CTNS to set up a battery, I guess, pack manufacturing endeavor in America, correct?
Yes.
Do current APTERA investors, are they going to be like part owners of that joint venture? How does that work?
They would be. So, we own 49% of that joint venture. Then obviously that's an asset that APTERA owns, and the shareholders of APTERA and the community that support us will own that as well.
Okay. All right. That was a kind of a investor question that I had from one of the investors. All right. So parts 2 and
Well, I think I'll leave the whole thing in. I don't need to block anything out because you really need to know that these guys never gave a timeline for anything. And I don't want you to think that I've cut something out where they've said something important. They have said nothing. They have just diverted and talked about irrelevant things every time they were asked a question about time. They're a disaster. They're an absolute disaster. Yet the fanboys will all be going, and I've looked at the comments already. Excellent interview. learned a lot from this, all sorts of nonsense. What these APTERA ambassadors are doing is giving all this positive talk because they have to, not because they're honest. They're not. I believe that just about every one of them knows that they're lying when they turn around and say, "Oh, I got a lot out of that." "Oh, that was great." They know they're lying. And it's all because they're just trying to push a silly trike that doesn't work. They don't want to lose what they put into it, and they're just trying to push, hoping that it'll come through. They haven't got a prayer. Anyway, that'll do from me. I'm not going to spend hours editing this one. That's all for me. Till the next one. Bye for now. Stay safe.